One of Robin Williams' most celebrated roles is that of the actor who disguised himself as a nanny to see his children in the midst of a divorce. There are several reasons why Mrs. Doubtfire remains a highly beloved film, and it's even my favorite Chris Columbus movie. This is a film that could have easily taken the story through the expected directions, but the filmmakers went down smarter roads that avoided turning Mrs. Doubtfire into a lesser movie. One of the best and most appreciative aspects of the film is how it handles the subject of divorce. While this is a comedy, there's no attempt to sugarcoat the pain and arguing that can come when a married couple decides they're no longer suited to be with each other. It takes the Hillers' marriage falling apart seriously, and while Daniel is the main character of Mrs. Doubtfire, the film does not take sides. It provides a complete understanding for both points of view. A lesser script would have made Miranda Hillard into an unlikable character who's just too stuffy, and she should just let Daniel have his fun. The movie does not do that. We understand her concerns about his behavior in the early scenes, and Sally Field was able to show the multiple emotions of her character. It also would have been easy to portray Daniel as this amazing person that we're obviously meant to root for at every moment, but they instead gave him some major flaws that he does have to work on. He does not always make the right decision, and he is just as much at fault for the marriage not working out. And when you stop and think about it, his plan of pretending to be a nanny is insane. However, it's a credit to Robin Williams that he's able to balance these less sympathetic traits with Daniel's positive qualities, like the genuine affection he has for his children and just wanting to be there for them. I think one of the standout scenes in the movie is when Miranda talks to Mrs. Doubtfire about her time with Daniel, and Field and Williams absolutely sell what those characters are feeling at that moment. Williams has to play Daniel finally listening to his wife and realizing the negative effect of his behavior and do it all with his eyes, and it's wonderfully done. While the script was being written, there were executives at 20th Century Fox who thought Daniel and Miranda should make up and get back together in the end. Williams, who had recently gone through a divorce a few years prior, and Chris Columbus rightfully fought against this, as they did not want to send the message that most divorced couples eventually get back together. Even in this comedy involving a man putting on a bunch of prosthetics to become a nanny for his children, it's great that they still sought realism when it came to this topic. Another thing I've long appreciated about the film is how depicted Stu, Pierce Brosnan's character. A lesser movie would have made him a complete jerk, so that we obviously get on Daniel's side and hope Miranda does not end up with Stu. Instead, he's a very nice person who genuinely wants what's best for Miranda and her children. Brosnan brings the needed charm and gets some funny reactions to Mrs. Doubtfire's treatment of him. He's probably thinking the entire time, what is this nanny's deal? And going back to how Daniel does not always make the right decision, the scene where he knowingly puts pepper in Stu's food at the restaurant is not depicted as this triumphant moment. Instead, we're obviously meant to view him in the wrong for using Stu's allergy against him, and Daniel himself eventually realizes his selfish action is hurting another person who never did anything to him. It's an example of how layered and fleshed out these characters are. The Hillard children are also made into distinct characters, and we see their varying points of view towards the whole situation and the arrival of Mrs. Doubtfire. Matthew Lawrence, Lisa Jacob, and Mara Wilson in her film debut were perfectly cast in those roles. I've spent quite a bit of time talking about the film's dramatic elements, but Mrs. Doubtfire is still, first and foremost, a comedy, and there are several hilarious scenes. Mostly courtesy of Williams, of course, who in his usual fashion ad-libbed and went off script a lot. Enough that when Columbus and his editor, Roger Gosnell, went to put the film together, they had to figure out which of the jokes to use. At one point, there was a cut that ran about 2.5 hours, which Gosnell was then able to get down to a more suitable length of 2 hours. And this is an exceptionally well-paced film that also knows when to shift between the comedic scenes and the more serious parts. And when we get scenes of Williams putting on a variety of voices, they do fit narratively and make sense. A big part of Daniel's character is he's an actor with an affection for doing voices, so he would naturally go into his routines all of a sudden. It's worth pointing out that Robin Williams also produced Mrs. Doubtfire, and so he had a lot to say about which jokes would be ideal to appear in the finished film. We frequently see Daniel think on his feet to humorous effect, especially when he has to switch between the Doubtfire persona and himself. This is the sort of scenario that could have made the film seem like an ordinary sitcom, but under Columbus's direction and with Williams' skills, they end up rising above that. The makeup that transforms him into Mrs. Doubtfire is fantastic, and frankly the film might have fallen apart if it was not believable. We have to buy that the family does not recognize it's Daniel as this elderly woman, and the makeup along with Williams' performance absolutely sells it. He even walked down the streets of San Francisco to see if anyone would bat an eye and recognize him, and he succeeded quite well. A large credit for that goes to Greg Cannon, who was the special makeup designer responsible for making Mrs. Doubtfire look like a real person and unrecognizable as Williams, while still giving him the ability to emote. Cannon, along with Vanille and Yolanda Tusing, won an Oscar for the makeup in Mrs. Doubtfire, and he was absolutely deserving. Speaking of, the decision to make Daniel's brother a makeup artist was an especially ingenious way to give him access to top-line prosthetics work. Although in real life he would not be able to just slip the face on and off and on again at such speed, as evidenced by Williams spending several hours in the makeup chair whenever he played Doubtfire. But this is a movie with a story he needs to tell, so some suspension of disbelief is acceptable. Columbus even scheduled the filming days to help give him a break from wearing the makeup every so often. I also want to mention the music by Howard Shore, which found the right sound for the lives of the Hillards, having a spirited tone while also highlighting the drama. Shore particularly knew how to score the more sentimental scenes without getting too syrupy. Interestingly enough, Mrs. Doubtfire shares quite a bit in common with another cross-dressing comedy classic, Tootsie. That one also involves an out-of-work actor who disguises himself as a woman to get a job, albeit for different reasons than Daniel. Both frustrate others with the notes during acting sessions, and like Daniel, the main character realizes the hurt caused by his behavior by taking on this other persona and does improve. I'm not saying Mrs. Doubtfire took direct influence from Tootsie, I just find the parallels interesting. With how successful the film ended up becoming, it's largely overshadowed the fact that it was based on a book. Titled Madame Doubtfire, or alias Madame Doubtfire, it was written by British author Anne Fine, with the book being set in England as opposed to San Francisco like the film. Fine would later reveal in an interview that she did not think much of the film adaptation, finding it too sentimental and wishing it was more of a dark comedy. When 20th Century Fox bought the film rights, Fine's choice for the role of Daniel was actually Warren Beatty, although she admitted that Robin Williams gave an impressive performance. So a film closer to the author's preferred vision would have probably been something very different than what made it on screen. Like I mentioned, Mrs. Doubtfire was a massive hit at the box office, which makes perfect sense when you watch it. It has the right crowd-pleasing quality to it, even when tackling this serious subject, and while there is quite a bit of adult humor, there was also a family appeal. I myself watched it at a young age and greatly enjoyed the movie. It was also one of those films that seemed to play in heavy rotation on television, and it's easy to get sucked into it when flipping through the channels. Of course, like most successful films, there was often talk of a sequel, even though it feels like the story seems wrapped up at the end. I don't know where else you could take it, but Fox kept hiring screenwriters to give it a try. One script had Daniel moving closer to his older daughter Lydia, who was now in college, to help her out with some problem. Robin Williams rejected this in other scripts, correctly reflecting that with Daniel's identity being known and Mrs. Doubtfire becoming a famous television personality, the story possibilities were limited. Eventually, Elf screenwriter David Birnbaum landed on a take that finally got Williams and Chris Columbus on board with making a sequel. However, a few months after the sequel was officially announced, Robin Williams died. That understandably ended development of the sequel, and Columbus has been very vocal about not wanting anyone to make Mrs. Doubtfire 2. Robin Williams was such a key part of bringing that character to the screen, and while a more faithful adaptation of the original book would be curious to see, a sequel, as Columbus has stated in several interviews, is impossible now. Mrs. Doubtfire is one of those films that just made so many smart choices that allowed it to stand out from other comedies of the era. Even with Robin Williams as the producer and star, it served as more than just a vehicle film. The filmmakers managed to take this premise that seemed wacky on the surface and made it work, thanks to both the humor and the heart they injected into it. We see the drive and emotions felt by Daniel, and Williams especially sells scenes like the one in the courtroom where he talks about how much he cares about his children. But it also recognizes the hurt that Miranda Hillard is feeling too, and I find that particularly admirable. We obviously are going into the film to see Robin Williams showcase his comedic abilities and disappear into the role of this nanny. But what makes the movie so special is its tackling of the divorce storyline and making sure everyone's perspectives are listened to. Mrs. Doubtfire stands as a high point in Robin Williams and Chris Columbus' careers, and a film always worth coming back to. See you next time.